Hey y'all, welcome back to the HackShack. Today I've got a little something different for you. Now you may or may not know that I'm an amateur radio operator. Well, I'm licensed. I've been licensed for quite a while. Not very active. There's a thing that happens every summer called Field Day, kind of headed up by the ARRL. It's always the same time every year. And I know that. And it always sneaks up on me. I'll put the actual thing right here when it is. It's every June. I think Friday, which was June 23rd, I came upon a tweet that was referencing Field Day, and I was like, crap, again? I haven't participated in Field Day in a very, very long time. I've got some gear here, and I put a tweet out that's, hey, should I throw a piece of wire up in a tree and try to make some contacts for Field Day? Got a few likes. One comment was like, yes. So I was mulling it over. And I'm not affiliated with the club since we moved. I haven't really been affiliated with an amateur radio club since I moved from South Carolina, but I always kind of like Field Day just for, if nothing else, I always kind of make myself get out there and participate, or I like the idea of participating. So what is Field Day? Field Day, I think the idea, if you look at the history of it, just like to demonstrate in the field per se, what organizations could do as far as demonstrating kind of the power of amateur radio. And there's these different classes and things, and there's all these bonus points. I'll put a link to the rules for this year, and you can see there's all these different things. But I mean, I'm not worried about any of that. And like I said, I'm not affiliated with any club, so I didn't know of any organization that I didn't want to just rush in at the last minute and say, hey, can I hang out with y'all? On Field Day. Although most are pretty cool, and they would have been like, yeah, welcome. I knew I had some gear, and I wanted to throw it together if I had enough stuff, and kind of do a pseudo Field Day in the backyard at the picnic table. I would be using commercial power, and I classify myself as a D class station, which is kind of like home. It's not really, I haven't had a home permanent station in a long time. I had nothing. I started that day, got an antenna going, and got my radio set up on a picnic table. And I was on commercial power, like I said. But other than that, it's probably like a good exercise in throwing together some quick communications on the spot. I'm going to show you what I used and how I did it. And I think, most people, I would think like me. And I say hacker, I don't mean like bad guy hacker, like somebody who just figures out something, right? Solves problems. I think a lot of us, or the people that watch this channel, the channels that I watch, the mindset of figuring out how to make something work under less than ideal conditions is pretty fun. So I'm going to show you what I kind of rounded up to make this possible for participating in Field Day this year. So, obviously you need a radio, kind of dirty, but this is my radio and tuner here. This is an ICOM IC706, and I've got an LDG IT100 tuner. So this radio will do all the HF bands, 6 meters, and then it'll actually do 2 meters as well off this different antenna port here. This black box on top, which is a needed thing for most setups, an antenna tuner. There are some manual ones out, but this one's automatic, and it's got a little cable, proprietary cable that goes to the back of the radio here. So it's kind of integrated. This is not the jumper I used. You'd probably want to use a shorter one as you can, but basically the output of the radio hooks to the TX port here. So there'd be one jumper like this, right? There'd be another jumper going to the antenna. What this does is as you move around in different frequencies and different bands, that kind of changes the kind of antenna or the length of the antenna that you would need for different things. So if you just want to use one antenna, or one, in my case, I'll show you in a minute, a piece of wire, as I move through different frequencies or bands, this is kind of like a matchbox, so to speak. What can happen that's bad if you have a mismatched antenna to a radio as you transmit out, sometimes a lot of your power that you're sending will be reflected back. And if that's an excessive amount, you can damage your transceiver, which is what we don't want. Now, if you have a perfectly resonant antenna, with whatever frequency you're trying to work, everything's hunky-dory, and you'll probably get the best performance out of your antenna. But what this will do was let me transmit to an antenna that's less than ideal, technically not resonant probably, but this protects the radio, and even though it might not be super efficient on what gets radiated, this will let me put the most power that I can, at least, and get it to the piece of wire at the other end to, give me my best chance of getting a signal out. So that's what this does. There are other kinds. I'll maybe put a link up or show a picture of ones that have their manual, and those work fine too. This one's kind of cool. I can spin around to where I want to talk, or off a frequency a little bit and hit a button, and usually if my piece of wire or whatever is not too far off, a couple of clicks later and I'm ready to transmit. So this is the radio that I used and the tuner that I used. This is, like I said, IC706. Now for antenna, and I was trying to dig all this stuff up, on Saturday, the day of Field Day. which was kind of running around a little bit. I burned a lot of time hemming and hawing, going back and forth on if I was going to do it or not, but I'm glad I did. So here's the kind of key part to my antenna system. There's a club in Hawaii that makes these, and it's like an in-fed HF matchbox, essentially. Inside here, there's like some toroids and coils that give a 9-to-1 unbalanced to unbalanced. The coax that you saw from the end of my tuner, however long it needs to be, goes into here, and just a piece of wire essentially will connect here. And this wing nut was one thing I was missing. I had to go to Lowe's to find a wing nut, but I got some now, so that's handy. So I've got that, and I was looking for some wire. I thought that I needed about 30 feet or so, and I was back at home. I didn't want to spend any money, so I found this spool of speaker wire, and it's not, originally it was 100 feet, but now at this point it's I basically unrolled the whole thing, and it ended up being about 30 feet, which is kind of what I was hoping to shoot for to stick on this. So basically unrolled it, pulled back the insulation on both of these. This is like a stereo wire, so it's got, 2 conductors. Just kind of twisted them together and just crimped this ring connector on here. And now at the other end, I've got some insulators from years of tinkering with this stuff. And I just, ran them through and crossed them, and I just zip tied across there to kind of hold that tight on this insulator. And here, this is some stealth braid spider wire, like filament for fishing. It's 30-pound test. It's really small and not noticeable, but super strong. And I'll show you what I did here. And I'll put an overlay here of the trees in the backyard. I don't have a picture of the antenna when it was up. I used this right here. And this is another thing I, talking about hacking or just trying to be resourceful. Got just rocks in here and this piece of rope, some nylon rope. I took this and you kind of sling it around and threw it over a limb in one of my pine trees out back. And then I could pull a length of filament over it. And then, just like I was showing in the picture, I could string up this, attach the filament. And on the one end, I pulled it down and it was tied to my chain link fence I'll show you. So then a few trees over, I put my box up. Now I went ahead and attached my coax, so I wouldn't, it needs to be on there before you go up in the air. And also this terminal was under this wing nut. This was all stretched out. This spool's not in there, just so this is a long length of wire. I did the thing with the rock again and threw that over another limb several feet away. And I put this over another limb and pulled it down. So with the tension from the 2 filament wires on both ends, my antenna system was, basically horizontal with some sag in it, of course, with this wire. And my coax came down down the tree and over to the radio. Oh yeah, I didn't mention I have a pretty nice 20 amp regulated, so it's kind of heavy. It's not a switcher. Power supply that powered the radio and antenna tuner. I ran some longer coax, similar to that jumper, but much longer, to make it from the box that was in the tree over to the picnic table where I was operating the radio. Went upstairs and grabbed a laptop of mine, also, plugged it into power. Some folks use fancy logging software. Like I said, I was just kind of using this as an excuse to get on the air because I haven't been on the air in so long. So I just literally opened up a notepad. Usually, if you're real serious about this, if you're in bigger operations, you'll find a kind of a free frequency. People will start calling out and you sit in one spot and people kind of come to you. I didn't want to play that. So what I did was I spun the dial around on various bands, mostly 20 meters. And 20 meters is, around 14 megahertz. I made several contacts. This setup is probably not super powerful, or I'm not radiating like somebody with beam antennas or even higher wire antennas. This was kind of higher than part of my house, but not super high. But it worked, which is really exciting. So what I would do usually is spin around, find somebody that was calling repeatedly. I would go ahead and pre-write down their call and their designation, like what type of station it is, like transmitters and type, like 1 Delta or 2 Alpha, and then their location. Usually it's just like a state acronym. Sometimes it might be something like PR for Puerto Rico, or like some states, I guess, are broken up more. So you might have something like NLI or LAX or something like that. But I'll go ahead and have that kind of pre-typed in, and then I would try to call. And sometimes I would be successful in getting them to hear me and come back, and sometimes I would not be. But more often than not, on most of the ones I tried, eventually, after waiting, sometimes it's a waiting game to let all the people that might be louder than you get through. Most of the time I would get a contact, and it was fun. So probably started about 7 p.m. that night, and probably a little bit after 11 p.m. local time, I stopped, and I had contacts all over like the northeast of the U.S., like Vermont, Maine, New York State, Rhode Island, into Canada and Quebec. Very odd to me, South Dakota, which I did not expect. That was surprising. I heard, a few California stations, but they couldn't hear me for whatever reason. Got into some Alabama, several in Florida, Puerto Rico. It was fun. Like Saturday morning, I had nothing, right? I hadn't prepped anything or touched anything. It was like late in the day, Saturday, I started scrounging things together. Now, yeah, I have a radio, so I went from nothing to operating in what I think as one person, a relatively short amount of time. And that was kind of fun. And it worked. And I was clearly able to communicate and just got me jazzed up. And I wanted to basically make this to share with you all, just to show, you don't have to have anything fancy to have pretty good luck. You basically just need to throw some RF down the line, and even if it's not the most efficient antenna, the main thing is you want to keep your radio from getting damaged. If you got a way with a tuner or whatever to protect your radio, you'll be surprised at what you can get to tune up and actually make contacts with. So if you have your license, or if you're on the fence or thinking it's like too complicated, or you won't be successful or enjoy it, give it another look. I'm going to try to get back into things, I think, a little bit here. And if you don't like talking to people, most people don't use their cell phones to speak on now. There are tons of digital modes. I love computers and stuff, and that's something I've never actually done. There's a thing called packet radio. I kind of dabbled with on the side just by watching other people and being around them, but I never messed with that. But there's all these other digital modes. Aura, there's teletype, RIDI, which is kind of like keyboard to keyboard communication. There's tons of stuff. So if you've kind of been interested but haven't looked in a while, I would say give it another look. You might enjoy it. Maybe you're out there and you're licensed, but you haven't been on the air in a while, and maybe this will get you say, hey, maybe I should get back on the air again. And if you're interested in, but you're not licensed and you want to be, maybe that'll get you thinking about looking at getting a license. Play around, experiment. Just don't get in trouble. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.